Welcome to the Got Trauma Podcast with your hosts, Courtney K. and Monica Newland.
Hello, we are back. So amongst the 10 bajillion technological issues that we've had in the past month, holy fuck.
We finally...
Honest to God.
we think that we've got it figured out.
I hope so. I think it's funny, though, that our first technological issue was at 11:11 today, and then the second one that we overcame was at 1:11 today. And I'm all about the number sequences in the universe. So the universe is just like gonna give you a run for your money, bitches. So
yeah, it's like have all the growing pains immediately, and let's just hope that this works and it records and that we actually have some content. Because it's been like an hour trying to figure out these difficulties. I'm not sure where we left off. So we're just going to patch this one in and pretend like it didn't happen and start talking about what our next thoughts were.
Shall we touch a little bit maybe on some narcissistic parenting that we experienced?
Yeah, that's a pretty constant in our lives, I think.
Yes.
So we might as
definitely. Well. Back to, I do remember I was talking about referring to my mother as an emotional Chernobyl. Mm-hmm. And just to touch on that a little bit, like my mom is an alcoholic and has been, and also just like a disclaimer here, I'm not talking shit about my mom. There's just a lot of stuff that's happened. I'm just speaking my truth on it. Like, this isn't me trying to, make her out to be an awful person. This is just, unfortunately, my personal experience being her child and being her only child to boot. So I didn't even have anybody else to experience it with me besides, friends who saw some behaviors. So that's a big thing I find too, when you're doing this kind of stuff, when you're speaking your truth, there's a lot of guilt that comes with it, I find. Because you're like, some people will see this and just view it as you just whining or bitching about having a shitty parent. And that's not what I'm trying to do. I just, it's my truth. And I just want to be able to speak it without having to feel guilty about it anymore. Because I'm just not there. So.
Well, I sure hope that anybody who's planning to listen to us is going to leave their judgments to the side, because if these topics don't resonate with you, then we get it. This has just been our experience. Yeah. This is just, like you said, we're just speaking our truth and what we've encountered along the way and how it's affected us and how we're trying to heal from things. It is what it is. And it's not that, we're not trying to relive the shit. We're not trying to put people down. We're not trying to make them out to be horrible people or anything. It's just that, we've gone through some shit and, we're bringing light to it for ourselves. Really. It's more so just, acknowledging that these things have happened and to, try to grow and move on and heal from it as best as we can. So hopefully no one is going to pass judgment, or if they know who we're talking about, leave your comments to yourself, because we don't want to hear it. We're not really interested and we're not doing it for you. We're doing it for ourselves.
Well, exactly. And it's just, again, it just felt like that was a thing, like a disclaimer to put out there. Just because, when you start getting into this stuff, obviously people do form opinions, and everybody's entitled to them. I'm not trying to, what's the word? I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say. I just wanted to, be really clear on what I'm talking about and why I'm talking about it, and not because I'm, trying to make this person look like a piece of shit. We all come from everybody else's trauma at one point or another. So.
Yeah. And each person has different experiences with individuals as well. Right. So my experience with your mom might have been, nothing but, great, I have lots of great memories of your mom.
Yeah.
I also know the other side. So it's,
yeah,
I think,
and that's just it too.
It's important to acknowledge and But I don't want to take away from, how you have felt, and you can share your experience. We like you said, we both come from households of narcissism, and that has been like, pretty profound on, how we grew up. And at least we see that now, how that's shaped us, how that's caused certain triggers, how that has led us to believe certain things or have certain behaviors. And
Yeah,
some of those are healthy and some of those, are unhealthy. And we're trying to work through some of those unhealthy things.
absolutely. And yeah, that's so going back to what I was saying, like my mom was an alcoholic, but my mom was also a really hard worker. So my mom's alcohol, her alcoholism stemmed from like 5 o'clock at night till 2 o'clock in the morning kind of thing. And some of the earliest memories I have as a kid, like, are, finding her asleep in places that she shouldn't be sleeping, or, having her fall down and like you think she's dying, that kind of stuff. So that for me as a child really sort of embedded this like impending doom. So I had a serious death fear by the time I was like 4. And I can remember like confronting my mom and just saying like, some of the things you do scare me. And, like these are my concerns. And I think I was like 3 or probably 4. And her just being like, well, if you think bad things, Courtney, bad things will happen. So as a kid, you're like, okay, but how do I now turn this off? Then it became an obsessive compulsive thing that I couldn't turn off. And again, that stayed with me until I just discovered narcissism when I was 37, back to being 37 again, and being like, holy fuck, that's what this was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I had no idea the things that she would say to me, the things that she would blame me for, like all this shit as a child. I was like, I just must be this piece of shit human. Like, wow, I'm really sorry that I came into existence. This is terrible for you. Like, that's how I grew up thinking about myself. And unfortunately I displayed that in like some of my behaviors as a teenager and even as a child. Like, I just never thought I was smart enough. I was always stupid. Like, yeah, it's pretty crazy how that can be implemented in your life and you don't even realize it until all of a sudden one day, again, your reserve for shit is so full. You're like, I got to deal with this.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
it's got to go.
So what were some of the experiences, like what were some of your like earlier memories, if you don't mind sharing like more specifics about like what did you see?
I think the scariest things. So my dad played music and he was gone that night a lot of the weekends. So I remember being like, I don't know, maybe I want to say 2.5, 3, because when I look back at pictures, there was this like, it was a Disney table and it had 2 chairs and it was plastic. And I just remember sitting in front of the kitchen window and I was eating a hot dog. And I remember her just going down on this table, like full on wiping out, and the table breaking and there just being this awful commotion. And I just remember being like terrified. And that's the only part of that memory I have. I don't remember what happened after that, but I just remember that being very significant as a child. Like, did she just die? Like, what happened?
So
I don't even know what death was.
she fell onto the table that you were sitting
Yeah.
at.
Yeah. She was incredibly intoxicated, which unfortunately also has, come to come to my knowledge now. Like, other adults that were associated with my parents have, come out in the last few years and been like, when you were little, it was pretty scary. Like, I've shown up at your parents' house and, you're like 18 months old and your mom is really intoxicated and probably shouldn't be taking care of you. And, being like, I actually, like, the person saying they stuck around until my dad got home because they were like, I can't leave this baby with this person. But here's the crazy fucking thing. Like, nobody called Children's Aid back then. Nobody actually did anything. And not that I blame anybody for, not doing anything, because it wasn't the way back then. But, you got to wonder sometimes how different your life would have been. And not that I feel like I should have been taken away from my parents. I'm sure people will beg to differ on that. But like I had to raise myself. I had to, emotionally, especially emotionally raise myself. Excuse me, which was really hard. Because like, I probably didn't hit emotional maturity until like 4 years ago. Like it's taken so long. But yeah, I unfortunately have lots of really scary memories as a small child, that pertain to my mom. Not so much my dad. My dad was an alcoholic too, but not to the extent that my mom was. But she has some serious demons that she has had with her probably since she was a child.
Yeah. And that's something that we, I think, have learned in more recent years, that often, or maybe every time, when you see people who are that self-destructive and they don't have the awareness of how that impacts their situation and people around them, it's likely due to them and their unresolved issues, their unresolved traumas themselves, their unresolved, pain that they have been bottling up. Likely she was, covering up those feelings and emotions with the booze. And, that's how she coped. And I mean,
100%.
coping, whether or not she was actually coping is up for debate, but that's likely, what, these people have done. Lots of people do. This is very common for people to use substance as a means of coping with their situation. And it's sad because, your parent is still alive all these years later and still self-destructive. And, it's difficult to process so many years of that, that addiction, that self-destructive behavior, and try to understand and make any sort of heads or tail, like, what the hell is going on here? Like, how is this still going on? How has that person been doing this all these years and not come to any sort of like aha moment of like, dead? Shit, this is not a good thing. Yeah. Or like, worse. Yeah. How have you survived this and gotten this far? Right.
Yeah.
How do you think that plays into the narcissism?
I think where I realized that it, like, a lot of the behavior was narcissistic was just again, blaming me for things like, shitty things that happened to her in her life. Like if, like for instance, when my stepdad passed away, I was blamed for him dying because he died of a broken heart, according to her, because I didn't finish my plumbing apprenticeship because I chose to have children. And that was, that was sort of the catalyst for when I finally started to like really snap and start to see it for what it was, because it's not like this behavior was new. It just hit me a different way this time. I was just like, wow, like I could never imagine blaming my children for these things in my life. I could never imagine.
And for context, he was sick as well. Like it wasn't like he just like died out of nowhere, or she left him and he actually had a broken heart. Like he had, lots of like lung issues, and like he had health problems that were outside of knowing you.
Well, exactly. And that was, it was basically because she said he gave up. So that was, because I wasn't going to take over their business. And it's like, you can't base your retirement on your children. Like things change. People can love a career one day and then decide the next day, if it's not working with your family, then, you're going to find something different and choose a different avenue. And that was just not an acceptable thing for her. And then, a couple of years go by and she's struggling. And, after I had my girls, because for context, my twins are 6. So this happened like 5 years ago after he passed away. And, she spent 2 years living on her own up there. And I mean, like, not that we didn't want to help her, but she was such an asshole about it. Like not doing anything for herself and expecting us to be up there all the time. We had small children, like she was never around to help us when we needed. which is fine. Like, that's not an expectation that I have for anybody. It just, in like, just to give it some, structure on what this sort of behavior, and just being like, okay, well, I pulled back then. And then obviously there's a lot of guilt in that. And then she had to sell her house, and we decided that she was going to move into a trailer here, which I can tell you how that physically affected me when that decision was made. And it was because I didn't think I had a choice. I really didn't think I had a choice other than I had to take care of her. This is my job. This is what I have to do, because this is what was, ingrained in me from the time I was small. I am your responsibility. You are not mine. I am yours. Mm-hmm. And so, she came, she lived here. It was an absolute fucking nightmare. And to the point where it was like, we were like, you need to go. We can't have you here. You're so destructive, and it's starting to weigh on my relationship with my partner. It was, bleeding onto my children. And I'm like, no. Like, we can't go through this again. And I remember calling the addiction outreach and like basically throwing myself at their mercy and being like, I need help. How do I get rid of this person? And like, that's a very naive way to like go into things. But then I was like, she gave me the epiphany when she said to me, this isn't your responsibility. You have taken this on because you think it's your responsibility, but it's not. You have a choice here, and your choice is to, like,
you had that epiphany?
Well, only because somebody basically gave it to me, in the sense they're like, you need to be accountable for the fact that you have allowed this. You allowed this back into your life. Nobody forced you to do this besides some sort of predispositioned, expectation. You were not forced into doing
that you were
this.
Feeling. Yeah.
But that can't be something that you live by or live through. Like, as shitty as it is, it's not my responsibility. I would never bestow that responsibility on my children. Mm-hmm. I would never just not do anything for, a large amount of time expecting someone to come save me. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not a realistic thing to do. But at that, in those, again, before it really, really hit me, like before my absolute tolerance was done and that was it, I had to have somebody basically just, say that to me, like, sorry, you're not the victim here. I know this behavior sucks, but you've allowed it. And that's a really shitty place to be too, because you're like, fuck, I did allow this. And that was a hard...
it's almost like you're encouraging the behavior, but you have that guilt of, and you've always been in the position where you've pretty much had to take care of them. Like, you've had to take care of her. Like, she put you in that position from, like, you're talking like 18 months old, where like she was not, being responsible for her actions and how it was affecting you. Like, that's like it's a long lifetime of feeling like you needed to make up for her like lack of caring and providing and safety. And then she's relying on you to provide that for her, likely because she's not ever experienced that in her own life. Maybe, when she was younger, she didn't have that safety either. So then she's always seeking it. And the person that she could try to get that from was you. I can't imagine how that guilt would feel. That's heavy.
It is heavy guilt. And I have had little to zero contact with her in the past 6 months or so. Probably for the last year, the contact's been like really minimal, because I've had to do like setting boundaries is, set a boundary. Setting boundaries is the hardest fucking thing you could ever do. It is not easy, and especially when you have allowed certain behaviors for so many years, trying to implement a boundary to somebody, they're like, what is this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you haven't so much set a boundary as you've literally more or less made a conquest for them. Mm-hmm. To be like, oh, well, I don't understand this. And they're going to do everything they can to try and override, what you're trying to implement. So, it's not an easy place or an easy thing to do and just be really clear about that. It's definitely, necessity, but it's not easy. And there's a lot of emotion that comes with it, a lot of, sad moments and angry moments. And, again, the objective is to respond and not react, which again, sometimes can be a challenge too. So, but yeah.
And these boundaries that you talk about, this is something that's been relatively new for you, at least to the extent that you've been now implementing those boundaries.
Well, they're brand new. They're brand new. Yeah. They're definitely in their infancy for sure.
And that's important to point out because we're talking decades of, abuse, or being, around this sort of toxic environment and toxic person. And it's taken you this many years of recognizing that, for one, that you have the opportunity to put these boundaries in place, that you have the right to put those boundaries in place. But it can happen. It doesn't matter. The sooner that you can do that and do that, and you're doing it in a healthy way to protect yourself, protect your family. In no way are you saying, at least I'm assuming this is what you're saying, that disconnecting from loved ones or disconnecting from people is the answer. It sometimes has to be, depending on the situation though. And it's not just you just cut people off and that fixes the problem. No, this is a lot of thought, a lot of, preparation on your end, a lot of recognizing that you need this space. You going back to what we were saying early on in the episode, where you don't have the capacity to deal with it until you got to sort that out and you got to get rid of some stuff. And what I'm hearing is you saying I got to put these boundaries in place. I got to have some distance. I got to be able to clear my thoughts, because we're just going back over the same problems and going through the same, issues over and over again. And that's a very common occurrence when you're dealing with narcissism as well, because they don't see anything wrong with their behavior. And until you start to put those things in place, until you say, hey, I'm not okay with this, or hey, I don't have any desire to engage like this anymore. They don't see anything wrong with it. They don't see anything wrong with their behavior. It's very difficult to convince them of that behavior, because that's the way they've always been.
Well, exactly. And you are definitely, generally, in my case anyways, I'm the root cause of that behavior. I'm the root cause of the reactions that, she has, or her feelings towards me. Those are my fault. I inflicted those by, not doing this or doing this, or
by being born, basically, is what
pretty much.
She thinks you're the root cause, but that's not actually true, right?
That's the scary part is it took me that long to figure that out, to be able to, and a lot of that is was lack of education. I didn't know. I wasn't, it wasn't,
well, there's no handbook.
Like I said, no, but there definitely is. But there's a lot of TikToks that are pretty fucking handy. So
it's true. It's true. There's a lot of people who are now out there talking about these things.
Well, and that's just, and a lot of it that, it stemmed from watching a video on something, and I was like, wait a second. And then, you start researching narcissism, and you're like, whoa, that's wild.
Yeah.
And you, especially, and the difference too, it's really interesting because there's mother-daughter narcissism, there's father-daughter narcissism. Everybody has a different sort of, there's different dynamics to it. It's not just cut and dry, just, one narcissist fits all.
No, exactly.
It's very diverse in how it's projected. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, for sure.
To see it and experience it for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So let me ask you, so we've been now talking for, quite a bit. And because this is our first episode, how do you feel in general, just talking about these things? How do you feel getting some of this? I don't know if it's getting it off your chest, if it's giving yourself a voice, a lot of the times people in these types of situations like don't feel like they've been heard or had their feelings validated.
Yeah.
How does it make you feel now talking about it?
I definitely developed a dark sense of humor about it. So that was really that's been my biggest coping mechanism, is just to sort of poke fun at some of the things that I've experienced and like just some of the behaviors. And, so it's funny sometimes when you're telling people some of your stories and they're just like looking at you like, what? Like that's real? And you're like, oh, yeah,
wait, that's not normal?
Yeah.
Oh,
wait a second. Are you sure? But it definitely, it's like Shrek says, it's better out than in. So, I think it's really important to just let it all out, because it's, it's not healthy keeping it in. Like I've got about 57 diaries with like 5 pages written in them, because I'm really good at keeping a diary. I like to just, all of a sudden it will be like, oh, I should probably write that down. Then I write it down, and then, I'll go through whatever, and I won't write anything for a few months, sometimes a year. And then I let it build up again. I'm still on that, like allowing myself a daily sort of routine to just sort of decompress myself. I'm still not 100% dedicated to myself, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like I just sort of started this, like I'm trying to implement healthier habits. And like, that's not easy. I mean, I still sometimes rely on nicotine and alcohol to, sort of get through the rougher patches. And, I'm hoping by letting all of this out and by acknowledging it and dealing with it and learning new coping mechanisms, that those will be coping mechanisms that I will finally leave behind me once, I've well established my tool belt as far as dealing with things go.
Yeah.
So,
no, I think I think it's a good plan. It's definitely better, I think like having some sort of self-expression and being dedicated to yourself, and, not like when I say dedicating, time and space, that's all self-love. It's all self-love practices. Yeah. And you're giving yourself a little bit back by, for one, acknowledging these things, working on it. And also, us talking about this and getting this out, however way it meets people, is, like I said, is a part of our healing journey as well. It's a bit of self-expression on our end. And it's gives, we feel a little bit like our souls have a little bit of voice, I guess. I don't know. That's how I feel.
Well, that's exactly it. Like, I feel like I just came to this point in my journey where I was like, for the longest time, I was like, I told myself, you don't deserve to be heard. Like, nobody's going to give a shit about what you have to say. It's not like it's valuable. It's not like it's, anything. You're not important. Don't pretend you're important. And it's like, what's with all this like negative, nasty, like self-talk? Like, why? Mm-hmm. Maybe it is important. Maybe there is somebody out there that this needs to reach, and maybe it will help. Maybe, like, you don't know until you try. And that's, where I kind of got to. I was like, and that's, where this really all just stemmed from, was I got to that plateau where I'm like, okay, where else do I go here? Like, I took a Reiki course. I got my level 1. Again, the holistic healing course I did. And, I've definitely implemented a lot of really great tools. But I'm like, there's more. There's more. What do I do? So this is where I'm at.
Yeah.
So,
well, I am certainly happy that you have, pushed us to start this. And I think that I'm really optimistic that, we're gonna have some fun with it. Like, this is definitely a podcast for information, education, chit chat. Maybe we'll have some people on, that sort of thing. But it's also us having real, raw discussions about the fucking shit. And I said about how like we would have these phone calls, and now we're basically just recording it. So buckle up. Hopefully it hits home for some people. And if anything, we're just trying to build some community, and, we are grateful for the people that we have in our lives. And we hope that we can be a part of anyone's, healthy, growth journey as well. And That's really where this is all.
And for them to be a part of ours
go.
too, right? Like,
absolutely.
Also, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I like it.
Let's end there, and we will, I guess everyone could stay tuned for the next episode where we'll delve a little deeper into our stories, and a lot of it's going to be like story time chat about things that we've encountered.
Lots of story time.
Yeah. And then also like, stuff that we have going on in our day to day. It's not just like reminiscing about the crazy past. It's also about how things are affecting our today, day to day, moving forward, how we're learning and growing along the way as well. Right. So
absolutely.
I think that was hopefully everybody liked that. That was a good first episode.
Yeah. Well, let's cross our fingers.
Hopefully this one uploaded and it works.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit those subscribe and share buttons. We'll see you at the next one.